The Victimitus Virus. Some people suffer from a contagious virus I call Victimitus. Perhaps you've seen it. People infected with Victimitus believe that everyone has it in for them, and the world owes them something, which isn't the case at all. I like the way author Mark Twain put it. Don't go around saying the world owes you a living. The world owes you nothing. It was here first. I played college football with a guy who unfortunately became infected. His comments drove me crazy. I would be starting, but the coaches have something against me. I was about to intercept the ball, but somebody cut me off. I would have gotten a better 40-yard dash line, but my shoes came loose. Yeah, sure. I always felt like saying, and I'd be president if my dad weren't bald. To me, it was little wonder that he never played. In his mind, the problem was always out there. He never considered that perhaps his attitude was the problem. Andrea, an honor student from Chicago, grew up in a home plagued by victimitis. I'm black and proud of it. Color has not always been in my way. And I learned so much from white and black teachers and counselors alike. But in my own home, it's a different thing. My mother, who dominates the family, is 50 years old, came from the South, and still acts as though slavery was just abolished. She sees my doing good in school as a threat, as if I'm joining the white vote. She still uses language like, the man is keeping us from doing this and that. He's keeping us boxed up and won't let us do anything. I always rebut with, no man's keeping you from doing anything, only yourself, because you keep thinking the way you think. Even my boyfriend falls into the white man is holding me back attitude. When he was recently trying to purchase a car and the sale didn't go through, he remarked with frustration, the white man doesn't want us to get anything. I almost lost it and confronted with him with how silly that kind of thinking was. But it only resulted in feeling like I was taking the side of the white man. I remain convinced that the only person who can hold you back is yourself. Besides feeling like victims, reactive people are easily offended, blame others, get angry, and say things they later regret, whine and complain, wait for things to happen to them, and change only when they have to. It pays to be proactive. Proactive people are a different breed. Proactive people are not easily offended, take responsibility for their choices, think before they act, bounce back when something bad happens, always find a way to make it happen, focus on things they can do about it, and don't worry about things they can't. I remember starting a job and working with a guy named Randy. I don't know what his problem was, but for some reason Randy didn't like me, and he wanted me to know it. He'd say rude and insulting things to me. He was constantly talking behind my back and getting others to side with him against me. I remember returning from a vacation one time and a friend telling me, boy, Sean, if you only knew what Randy was saying about you, you'd better watch your back. There were times I wanted to pound the guy, but I somehow managed to keep my cool and ignore his silly attacks. Whenever he insulted me, I made it a personal challenge to treat him well in return. I had faith that things would work out in the end if I acted this way. In a matter of a few months, things began to change. Randy could see that I wasn't going to play his game and began to lighten up. He even told me one time, I try to offend you, but you won't take offense. After being at the company for about a year, we became friends and gained respect for each other. Had I reacted to his attacks, which was my feline instinct, I'm certain we wouldn't be friends today. Often, all it takes is one person to create a friendship. Mary Beth discovered for herself the benefits of being proactive. I'd taken a class at school where we had talked about proactivity, and I'd wondered about applying it to how it could be really applied. One day, as I was checking groceries for a guy, he told me that the groceries I'd rung up weren't his. My first reaction was to say, you idiot, then put the bar down between the other customer's groceries. Why didn't you stop me sooner? So I had to delete it all and call to get the changes approved by a supervisor, while he just stands there and thinks it's funny. Meanwhile, the air is raising, and I'm getting really irritated. To top it off, then he has the nerve to question the price I charged for the broccoli. To my horror, I discovered he was right. I had put the wrong code numbers in the register for the broccoli. Now he was extra irritated and so tempted to lash out at him to cover up my own mistake. But then this idea popped into my head. Be proactive. So I said, you're right, sir. It's completely my fault. I will correct the pricing. It'll just take a few seconds. I also remember that being proactive doesn't mean you're a doormat. So I reminded him nicely that to avoid this kind of thing in the future, he would need to always put the bar down between separate orders. It felt so good. I had apologized, but I had said what I wanted to say. It was a simple thing, but it gave me such conversion and habit and confidence in this habit. At this point, you're probably ready to shoot me and say, "Now come on, Sean, it's not that easy." I won't argue with you. Being reactive is so much easier. It's easy to lose your cool. That doesn't take any control. And it's easy to whine and complain. Without question, being proactive is the higher road. But remember, you don't have to be perfect. In reality, you and I aren't either completely proactive or reactive, but probably somewhere in between. The key then is to get in the habit of being proactive so you can run on autopilot and not even have to think about it. If you're choosing to be proactive 20 out of 100 times on average each day, try doing it 30 out of 100 times, then 40. Never underestimate the huge difference small changes can make. We can only control one thing. The fact is, we can't control everything that happens to us. We can't control the color of our skin, who wins the NBA Finals, where we're born, who our parents are, and how much tuition will be next fall, or how other people might treat us. But there is one thing we can control: how we respond to what happens to us. And that's what counts. That's why we need to stop worrying about things we can't control and start worrying about things we can. Picture two circles, like the one down here. The inner circle is our circle of control. It includes things we have control over, such as ourselves, our attitudes, our choices, our response to whatever happens to us. Surrounding the circle of control is the circle of no control. It includes the thousands of things we can't control or do anything about. Now, what will happen if we spend our time and energy worrying about things that we can't control, like a rude comment or a past mistake or the weather? You guessed it, we'll feel even more out of control, as if we are victims. For instance, if your sister bugs you and you're always complaining about her weaknesses, something you have no control over, that won't do anything to fix the problem. It'll only cause you to blame your problems on her and lose the power yourself. Renatha told me a story that illustrates this point. A week before her upcoming volleyball game, Renatha learned that the mother of a player on the opposing team had made fun of Renatha's volleyball skills. Instead of ignoring the comments, Renatha became angry and spent the rest of the week stewing. When the game arrived, her only goal was to prove to this mother she was a good player. To make a long story short, Renatha played poorly, spent most of her time on the bench, and her team lost the game. She was so focused on something she couldn't control, what was said about her, she lost control of the only thing she could, herself. Proactive people, on the other hand, focus elsewhere, on the things they can control. By doing so, they experience inner peace and gain more control of their lives. They learn to smile about and live with the many things they can't do anything about. They may not like it, but they know it's no use worrying. Turning setbacks into triumphs. Life deals us a bad hand, and it's up to us to control how we respond. Every time we have a setback, it's an opportunity for us to turn it into a triumph, as this account by Brad Lemley from Paradise Magazine illustrates. It's not about what happens to you in life, it's about what you do about it. Or so says W. Mitchell, a self-made millionaire, a sought-after speaker, a former mayor, a river rafter, and a skydiver, and he accomplished all of this after his accidents. If you saw Mitchell, you'd find this hard to believe. You see, the guy's face is a patchwork of multicolored skin grafts. The fingers of both his hands are either missing or mere stubs, and his paralyzed legs lie thin and useless under his slacks. Mitchell says sometimes people try to guess how he was injured. A car wreck, Vietnam. A real story is more astounding than one could ever imagine. On June 19, 1971, he was on top of the world. The day before, he bought a beautiful new motorcycle. That morning, he soloed in an airplane for the first time. He was young, healthy, and popular. That afternoon, I got on that motorcycle to go to work, he recalls, and at an intersection, a laundry truck and I collided. The bike went down, crushed my elbow, and fractured my pelvis, and the gas can popped open on the motorcycle. The gas poured out, the heat of the engine ignited it, and I burned over 65% of my body. Fortunately, a quick-thinking man in a nearby car lot doused Mitchell with a fire extinguisher and saved his life. Even so, Mitchell's face has been burned off, his fingers were black, charred, twisted, and his legs were nothing but raw, red flesh. It was common for first-time visitors to look at him and faint. He was unconscious for 2 weeks, and then he awakened. Over 4 months, he had 13 transfusions, 16 skin grafts operations, and several other surgeries. 4 years later, after spending months in rehab and years learning how to adapt to his new handicaps, the unthinkable happened. Mitchell was involved in a freak airplane crash and was paralyzed from the waist down. When I tell people there were two separate accidents, he says, they can hardly stand it. After his paralyzing plane crash accident, Mitchell recalls meeting a 19-year-old patient in the hospital's gymnasium. The guy had also been paralyzed. He had been a mountain climber, a skier, and an active outdoors person, and he was convinced his life was over. Finally, I went to the guy and said, "You know something? Before all this happened to me, there were 10,000 things I could do. Now there are 9,000. I could spend the rest of my life dwelling over the 1,000 that I lost, but I choose to focus on the 9,000 that are left." Mitchell says his secret is twofold. First is the love and encouragement of friends and family, and second is a personal philosophy he had gleaned from various sources. He realized he didn't have to buy society's notions that one must be handsome and healthy to be happy. "I'm in charge of my own spaceship," he states emphatically. "It's up, my down. I choose to see the situation as a setback or a starting point." I like how Helen Keller put it. "So much has been given to me. I have no time to ponder which has been denied." Although most of our setbacks won't be as severe as Mitchell's, all of us will have our fair share. You might get dumped by a girlfriend, you might lose an election at school, you might get beaten up by a gang, you may not be accepted to the school of your choice, you may be severely ill. I hope and believe that you will be proactive and strong in these defining moments. I remember a major setback of my own. 2 years ago, I had come to the starting quarterback in college. I seriously injured my knee, fell backwards, and subsequently lost my position. I vividly recall Coach calling me to his office just before the season began and telling me they were handing the starting job to someone else. I felt sick. I'd worked my whole life to get this position. It was my senior year. This wasn't supposed to happen. As a backup, I had a choice to make. I could complain, badmouth the new guy, and feel sorry for myself, or I can make the most of the situation. Luckily, I decided to deal with it. I was no longer throwing touchdowns, but I could help in other ways. So I swallowed my pride and began supporting the new guy and the rest of the team. I worked hard and prepared myself for each game as if I were the starter. And more significant, I chose to keep a chin up. Was it easy? Not at all. I often felt like a failure. Sitting out every game after being the starter was humiliating, and keeping a good attitude was a consistent struggle. Was it the right choice? Definitely. Even though I wore out my bum on the bench all year, I contributed to the team in other ways. Most important, I took responsibility for my attitude. I cannot begin to tell you what a positive difference this singular decision made in my life.